Nancy Pelosi's trip obviously has become quite controversial. It's certainly raising fears that China might actually make a long-threatened move here. Where do you stand on this? Should she go?
Sandra, Speaker Pelosi should absolutely go forward with her trip to Taiwan. She might want to consider adding a prominent Republican like Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, to show the bipartisan support that exists in this country for Taiwan. We cannot allow Chinese threats to deter a mere visit by a member of Congress to Taiwan. There's been a long-standing practice from presidents of both parties that executive branch officials don't visit Taiwan, but there's been an equally long-standing practice that members of Congress do visit it. I have, many of my colleagues have, Speaker Pelosi has before. We cannot back down in the face of these Chinese threats. If Joe Biden does, if he prevents Nancy Pelosi or any other member of Congress from traveling to Taiwan, it will create a major foreign policy crisis. Imagine what it will signal to the Chinese communists if they think they can threaten us into merely not traveling to Taiwan. It might, in fact, incite them and tempt them to go for the jugular in Taiwan.
So there's all of this discussion as to whether or not President Biden looks weak in the face of this. I think Xi Jinping is probably worried about looking weak in the face of this, with the Communist Party Congress coming up as well, that if Nancy Pelosi suddenly shows up in Taipei while his leadership tenure is being discussed, party leaders might look at him and say, wait a minute, are you the right guy for the job? But you mentioned Kevin McCarthy and that he should go on this trip. Here's what he said a couple of days ago about it. Listen here.
Well, President Biden sounds like the commissioner of the NBA. He just folds to whatever China wants instead of standing up for America. He's delaying weapons from being sent to Taiwan. Let Taiwan defend themselves. Let's make sure China does not invade Taiwan. And let's not allow China to dictate where any American citizen goes to meet any others.
Joe Biden is scheduled to speak with Xi Jinping later on this week. If you were the president and this had come up, what would you be saying in that conversation?
I would tell Xi Jinping that Speaker Pelosi and any other member of Congress will travel to Taiwan at a time of their choosing, as they have for decades, that China is not going to unilaterally change the terms of our engagement with Taiwan, and that instead of Joe Biden worrying about what the Chinese communists might do, then we should make the Chinese communists worry about what we might do if they engage in such rash, provocative, unprecedented actions.
You know, the American people stop, they listen, they see the warnings about what China is saying and the threats of what they might do. What is your message to the American people we know are closely following along with all of this? What do you want the American people to know about these dire moves that China just may make?
Well, first off, the American people, by and large, see China as an enemy. They have been the leaders on this. Many people in Washington have taken a longer time to come around to that. So the American people are behind those of us who want to take a strong, firm, competent line with the Chinese communists. And I would say to them about Taiwan, what I was saying last year about Ukraine, what I've said for years about Iran and other outlaw nations, is that the very best way to prevent a war is to be strong and resolute to deter our enemies from ever thinking that they could win a war.
You know, Senator, back in 1997, the last time that there was a crisis between the U.S. and China over Taiwan, we sent a couple of aircraft carrier groups to the region as a show of force to say, look, stop doing what you're doing because it could end up with serious consequences. The China that we see today in 2022 is much different than it was in 1997. They've got the biggest Navy, maybe not the most powerful Navy, but they've got the most number of ships. They've got that new Fujian aircraft carrier. I've read some papers that suggest that if this came to a shooting war, that China, with all of its long-range and intermediate-range missiles, could take out the Pacific Fleet in a matter of hours. So what could we really do about it?
So, John, I'm not sure I agree with those assessments, but you are right that there's no doubt that the gap has closed between the American military and the Chinese military over the last 25 years. So we're now creating a situation where the Chinese might be tempted to what Winston Churchill called a trial of strength. That's why it's so urgent that we not just fully fund our military, but that we're investing in the kinds of weapons that would deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which is the single most likely flashpoint for a war between our two nations.